Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Breaking Bias podcast. My name is Dr. Obbs, and I am joined, as always, by the amazing Molly. How's it going, Molly?
I'm doing great. How are you? Aside from, if you can't hear it, a little bit of the plague that I have somehow contracted from a concert, but I'm hanging in there. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. No plague yet. The kids have been at camp all week, so I fully expected to have some sort of sickness by now, but no, fingers crossed, I'm okay.
I'm gonna knock on wood. It's always how it goes, right? I was like, I knew
Yeah,
exactly where this came from, and you know what? It was worth it.
yeah, yeah. But speaking of worth it, we had a pretty awesome weekend.
We did.
There was a lot going on. We had
Yes.
the Canadian Grand Prix. We had Le Mans, right? We had everything. Or was Le Mans?
NASCAR Mexico City.
Yeah,
We had,
NASCAR
and then,
Mexico City. And where was
yep.
IndyCar racing at?
IndyCar was at WWTR, and I hate to say it, IndyCar was the best race of the weekend.
Really? That's the one I missed.
Best race of the weekend.
It was late though, right?
Absolute
I think it was late.
banger. Yeah, because they're 2 hours
That's why I
behind, and
missed
it's a
it.
night race. It was like an 8:30
Yeah.
green flag or something. It was
Gotcha.
so
That's
late.
why I missed it. Man,
Absolute
yeah,
banger.
I mean, there was so much racing over the weekend. We'll definitely get into the F1
Overload.
stuff. I think for me, Le Mans was like, let's just talk about Le Mans for just a second. So Le Mans was like, after qualifying, when you saw the caddies up there, it was like, holy cow, is Ferrari going to go down? But no, sure enough, Ferrari
No.
was right back there again.
I think the caddies still suffer a little bit on straight line speed, and with the Mulsanne and the way that Le Mans exists, I think they're able to get it for like a single lap run. But over the course of race pace, I think the caddies still struggle. They do have quite favorable bop, which is nice. It should be helping them out, which I think it is. But I think the Ferraris are still, quite honestly, as we saw, the team to beat in Hypercar, which is wild, but 3 in a row for Ferrari, which is really cool to see.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
I
they get
mean,
to keep the trophy.
they got bopped, again,
Yep.
but like they changed the
did.
bop this time. It was like they actually, I think compared to last year, it was a little bit lighter than the bop in 2024, and actually they changed the bop on the power limitation. I think it was in the upper end of the torque band or something like that, or RPM band. Yeah. Whatever they did, it didn't freaking work because they were they were rapid again. Yeah, I mean, Porsche Penske, the only one that kept them honest, I guess, during the race.
They were pretty close, so they were kind of up there. They seem to be one of the few teams, I think, that can challenge Ferrari in some of the WEC races. So I think it'll be interesting to see as teams are still working to close the gap, since Ferrari seems to be the one to beat. And we have Ferrari as an LMH, and the Porsches are LMDHs, as are the caddies. So it's always interesting. I like how they're able to level the playing field like that, but it still seems like Ferrari's far and away. It's giving shades of Toyota Gazoo for a while there, where it's just they are untouchable in the best way, obviously. So, but Le Mans was good. It's a classic Le Mans, I would say. It wasn't. I'm like, there wasn't anything like groundbreaking for me in terms of Le Mans of like, oh my gosh, this and this. But it was so really cool to see Ferrari go 3 in a row. Robert Kubica. His car won this year. So it's the first Polish driver, I think, ever to win overall as well. So that was really cool to see.
That's pretty awesome. That was awesome.
There was heartwarming.
And I guess like it was super late there in Le Mans, and I was kind of not secretly, but I was sort of, I was cheering for our friend Blake.
Of course, I always am too.
Yeah, for Wayne Taylor Racing.
Some
caddy.
40, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that. Unfortunately, they had a DNF, and when they pulled over to the side, whose voice was on there? It was Blake's voice. He was like, man, sorry about that. He was like, that's a bummer, or something like that. I was like, oh, it's Blake!
I was like, wait, I know him. There are certain voices that come over the radio, and I whip around so fast regardless of what it's usually, I'm like, and I was like, oh my God, it's Blake.
So he was pulling the night shift, the late shift there, I guess, because I think it was pretty late when that happened. So really unfortunate for Wayne Taylor Racing, but they had a tough qualifying as well.
They did.
Le Mans will Le Mans. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like you come in, it doesn't matter what you've been doing up until that point. It's like, can you get Le Mans right?
It's very much its own beast of the tracks that they go to and what it requires from the car. So it's one of those things where it's, even if you're performing well, there's some lessons you can learn prior to Le Mans, but Le Mans is such its own beast. They already did Spa.
They already did Spa. Where are they going to next?
They're at Watkins Glen for IMSA this weekend on WEC schedule. Let's look. I think they have a couple weeks off. 25 WEC schedule. Thank you, WEC website. They are at Sao Paulo in a couple weeks, July 13th. They were there last year and it was a banger.
Yeah.
So
how many hours is that one?
6, I think.
6 hours.
I think 6 hours Sao Paulo. Yeah. 6 hours
Cool.
Sao Paulo. So that'll be really good. And then it's Lone Star Le Mans, then Fuji, and then Bahrain, and they're done.
Nice. Yeah, so if you're not watching WEC World Endurance Championship,
you need to be.
You should be. Some really good racing there for sure. Let's talk quickly about NASCAR. NASCAR in Mexico. I was like laughing when like all the NASCAR fans were like gawking at like the whole stadium section and stuff, and I was just like, yes, like we know this from Formula One, this is so cool. And they were like, this is awesome. Yeah. So it was kind of cool to see NASCAR kind of coming around on that and seeing that. What was your feeling from the race? The result.
SVG supremacy.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, prior to Shane Van Gisbergen coming to NASCAR, I was a big Shane Van Gisbergen, Scotty Mac girl in supercars. So to have him racing over here is amazing. But that race was really cool. And for them to not be afraid to try new tracks, they haven't been to Mexico City in the top class ever. The lower class has, and it's been 14 years since they were there. So I was so excited to see that they were like, let's go back, let's do it. And then once the race actually happened, they were mixed conditions. They had to make the decision of getting onto wet. So NASCAR called the caution, said you got to get on wet tires. They were racing in mixed conditions. It was a really interesting like strategy call race where when did you put your essentially your slicks back on, your dry tires back on, and then actually Shane won by the largest margin of victory I think ever in a NASCAR Cup Series race. It was like 17 seconds or something. It was unreal
domination.
It was so
he
absolute domination.
And he got, I guess the thing that we learned later was that he got some tips from Max Verstappen,
yes,
right?
I was going to bring that up.
He said he had a chat with Max, yeah.
Yeah, he was texting with Max, and Max had given him some tips and pointers on what the best lines are to take, what he needs to watch out for, some pointers on entry and exit for some of the different corners for him to reference in the Cup car that Max knows from racing there in Formula One, which is so cool.
Yeah. No, that was super cool. I mean, SVG though, Red Bull driver, right? So Red Bull kind of system driver. So that's about as close to a Red Bull fan like me being able to classify that as a Red Bull win in NASCAR.
Yeah.
Denny Hamlin.
I was going to say he wasn't in the Red Bull car. They didn't have the Red Bull car that weekend.
Yeah. Denny Hamlin also didn't race that race because he had the birth of his daughter, right? I think his
son.
Little girl. Son. Sorry, Denny.
Son. So
birth of his
congrats
son.
On the Hamlin family.
Yep. Congrats to them for sure. I respect that decision, as a father myself with four little kids.
That's fair.
But, I mean, Denny doesn't really like these types of tracks anyway. So I think it was probably okay.
For the best.
So SVG, I mean, he's just so strong at these kinds of like road courses and things like that.
And I always remind everybody he's not only so good at these courses because this is very similar to Supercar and what they tend to race, but the Gen 7 Cup car went and benchmarked the Gen 3 Supercar, which is what he was racing in, and is actually heavily benchmarked off of the Gen 3 Supercar. So that's why it is still a big learning curve, and you can tell he's still got a lot to learn in the Cup car, but it's so easy for him to come over in the Cup car. And I remember one of the first things he said was, I don't have my feelers, which are his mirrors. He uses the tip of the mirror on the wall in the supercar. He's like, I don't have my feelers, so I have to re-understand how to like orient a corner and my distance to the wall. But the car is heavily, heavily based off of what he was racing in. And I highly recommend go back and watch the IndyCar race.
Yeah, tell me about it because I missed that one. So yeah, what happened?
Holy crap. Absolute
I heard there was some drama. I mean, I've just like seen things about McLaren Arrow and like stuff that's going on or something.
Nolan Siegel, essentially that is just Nolan Siegel, who drives for Aaron McLaren, got in the way of Scott McLaughlin, who was leading the race, He was a lap down when it happened. He ultimately gets penalized. And so Nolan just got he was frustrated in the heat of the moment on the radio and was, as one does, a little heated. And apparently that was like the end of the freaking world. But then you have your team principal out here, Aaron McLaren, starting fights with drivers on Twitter. So, like, I don't really...
with Pato? Was that the whole Pato thing?
Tony Kanaan. No? Tony Kanaan is picking fights on Twitter.
I saw that one. Yes, I saw that one from before, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But so it was a insane strategy race. So there was fuel mileage, tire mileage. There was this wild wreck with Joseph Newgarden from the lead. Pretty much it looked like it was
crazy.
Pretty much Penske's race to lose. And just 1, 2, 3, they all kind of were out of it. And then you had Connor Daly racing Pato Award for the lead. And then like the way strategy played out, you wound up with Kyle Kirkwood getting the win. It was one of those IndyCar races where it's like, I have no fucking clue what's going to happen. And I'm screaming at the TV as they're making short track passes. It was such a good race. Highly recommend it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to go back and watch that. You've convinced me.
It was a banger.
That's awesome. I'll definitely go do that. So let's jump into Formula One.
Yeah.
So we had So we haven't had a podcast since Barcelona.
Yeah.
But I just choose to forget it because mine was a painful degradation race for Red Bull. But Canada, I guess I mean, same issues, I think, kind of prone to Red Bull that were there from Spain. But let's just sort of talk about the TD, because that was one of the big things we haven't talked about, was the TD from Barcelona.
Yeah.
And then now we've got two races. We've got 2 races now of seeing it. What do you think? Do you think this has done anything? Is it just a much ado about nothing?
I feel like it's not done as much as everybody thought it was going to do, right?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Like, McLaren's still fastest.
They're still fastest. And I mean, the flaps do pivot for sure, 100%. Yeah. I think though that like I'm still the like, jury's still out, let's wait and see.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that McLaren had like struggles all weekend in Canada. Yeah. They didn't struggle in Barcelona.
No. Didn't they have a new wing for Canada?
So they had an experimental wing. So what they did was they brought out, like in free practice, this kind of experimental wing that, as far as I could see, I didn't see any major changes to the flaps or cord links or anything like that on the elements. But right there at the end plate, where most people are being kind of cheeky on how the end plate transition to the front wing elements, they added these things which they called mermaid tails, and they're just like little vortex generators like all over the place to try to kind of
They look like the Stegosaurus fins that some of the MotoGP teams use.
Yeah, they do. But it's like, I think it's kind of cool because like there was a lot of talk last year and late in 2023 with the amount of outwashing designs that teams were doing with the front wing end plates, and kind of they walk back the regulations a bit to try to close some of it up. Well, either way, they're still allowed a lot of room to be able to do things, as we can see by some of these designs. So I think that's kind of cool that teams are still sort of innovating in this area, but they never ran it in the race.
No,
so they did it in free practice. They never ran it in a race.
Yeah, there was a lot. I saw a lot of Floviz in free practice one at Canada. A lot of teams were running some Floviz on their cars, which I don't know if that was to be expected, but it was like, you must not know what you want, or you must not like what you saw. The less you know from your analysis, the more likely you're to Floviz a car, right?
Oh yeah. Dead giveaway. I mean, if there's you're trying to learn something for sure, and it's like where what sections of the car was the Floviz added. I mean, the thing about the front wing is that the front wing sets everything else up. So if you are, I mean, like for instance, McLaren also made some changes to the aero shrouds on the front suspension. And actually, we found out after the race that they did change something subtly in the geometry. But what we usually look for is like anti-dive angle, for instance. I mean, we overuse the term anti-dive, but it's just because the upstream front leg of the upper wishbone and the downstream leg of the upper wishbone are just offset, and this sets an angle. Now, whether or not it's for anti-dive reasons or whatever, or aero reasons, it's still something you do with anti-dive. So there we go. We classify it as anti-dive. And I didn't notice anything geometrically, but Stella did say they made some minor changes that actually Lando ran, but Piastri did not run. And one of the downsides of anti-dive is that while it reduces the amount of dive or nose down that you get when you apply the brakes hard, it kind of takes some feel away from the driver. Like the driver can't feel because the loads are not coming through the suspension the same way through the chassis. And for that reason, the driver really can't sense or feel the tires. They can't feel when they're maybe about to lock up, so they regulate their brake pressure or any of that kind of stuff. So Lando wanted some feel back. So for that reason, they kind of modified his a little bit. But Scarbs, did you see the picture that Scarbs took, Molly?
Yeah, I did. I didn't do much analysis because I was on my deathbed, but I saw it.
So maybe
it was a rough weekend.
Yeah,
it was a really rough weekend. Okay,
I forgot.
It's okay. I asked you the question. Okay. I was like 101-degree fever, just like trying to sweat it out.
And you watched all this motorsports too. Congratulations. You are dedicated.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
I was like, the universe said you're not going to Montreal, babe. You're sick. Stay home.
Proud to be co-hosting this podcast with you, Molly. You are dedicated. But like, I should walk it back. Scarbs didn't take the picture. Sorry. Somebody else took the picture, but Scarbs showed the picture, referenced who took the picture and labeled everything. It's like a multi-link sort of front suspension setup and basically how the suspension arms basically terminate into the upright. And instead of like a traditional, I am not a suspension expert, so I'm going to butcher the heck out of this, but instead of like a typical split suspension setup, like a wishbone style, they've got some sort of like a faux datum or faux axis because they've got like an offset multi-link attachment. There you go.
Yeah.
And supposedly this is supposed to allow you to do some cheeky little different things in setup for scrub. So you remember like dual axis steering, one of the things it would do is kind of allow you to scrub the tires and keep them warm on the straights.
Yeah.
And adjust the camber in a certain situation that allowed you to still be fast in the corners. Apparently this multi-link allows like more freedom of motion or something for the whole front upright to be able to move in a way that allows you to still maintain some scrub on the straights, but still have the right camber angles when you're going around corners. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. I will go back and look at it. It's super cool. Yeah, really,
I looked at it and I think I retained nothing. It sounds really cool and it makes sense.
Yeah, when it's like coming from the aero side, I'm like, bang, like I got this. But then when we start talking about like multi-links and like all these different like suspension geometries, I'm like,
I got enough of a like vehicle dynamics foundation. I'm dangerous. I got enough to be dangerous.
Good.
So I have to go look.
Go take a look at it and tell and correct in the show notes like all the things I messed up.
Right. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. Worst case, I'm gonna make a Twitter thread. It'll be okay.
That'd be perfect. Yes, everybody watch out for that Twitter thread. Molly makes the best.
Don't promise anything.
Let's pump this up.
Oh my god. Oh, don't promise anything.
But McLaren, okay, so coming back to it, is the TD doing anything? Okay, I was completely off. No, I was not completely off. Jury's still out. I still think that on tracks where you have to have good aero efficiency, Mercedes will struggle because they were manipulating front wing flexibility the most.
Okay.
I think that McLaren had some troubles in Canada, and I believe that it is partly attributed or can be attributed to the technical directive and what they were previously experiencing, which was wonderful, fantastic balance when they have to run higher front wing flap angles. And Montreal requires you to run some higher front wing flap angles because it's mostly low speed corners. So where you would now start to have that problem with balance is a track like that. Austria, let's see what happens in Austria.
Yeah.
Because Austria, again, is going to be another track where this might be a problem.
Yes, it will.
So,
yes. Yeah. I knew about McLaren. I knew Mercedes was going to be strong because there's a lot of low speed in Canada, and we've kind of established that Mercedes is good in the low speed. They are a very low speed efficient car. But I was like, unsure on the TD. And I agree. I think the jury's still out. I think that we're seeing some impact, but it's not like what everybody's like, oh my God, they're going to kneecap this team. I think jury's still out on really what the true impact is and who's struggling with what, and is it really the TD or is it this type of track that it's pertaining to, right? Because even I think Mercedes had floor edge stuff, right? That I think kind of helped them overcome maybe some of their struggle. They
I
had
mean,
this. It was
Mercedes.
serrations, right? Or like
It's the little vortex generators on the floor edge wing.
That's right.
Mercedes was already like, how many floor edge wing vortex generators do you need? Yes, was the answer from the
Yes,
arrows.
all of
It's
them.
like they've got like
Yeah.
15 now or something. Not 15.
They have a
but they've got a lot.
bunch.
They've got a lot.
Yeah, I did see that. I do
Yeah.
recall seeing and retaining that in the grand scheme of the weekend.
Yeah. And those generally speaking are going to help a bit to sort of create some rotation around the floor edge that will help with the floor edge outwash. So Mercedes has all these floor edge wings vortex generators, and that's just going to help you kind of create some floor edge outwash that will ultimately discourage. There's no sealing happening. We've talked about that before, but it will help you discourage inwash so you can generate a bit more overall floor load and maintain some edge load. But Mercedes, you want to hear something crazy? Not crazy, but like I had a thought the other day. Because one of the reasons we talked about Mercedes being strong here is like, well, they've always been strong here. And then I was like, all right, let's go look at it. Okay. So since 2022, like this regulation set.
Okay.
Mercedes, before Canada, in 2022 had an average finishing position of P4 coming into Canada, okay? And then in Canada in 2022, they got P3. In 2023, average position again coming into Canada, P4, finished P3. 2024 was like more troublesome. They had an average finishing position in 2024 of P6.
Okay.
They still finished P3 in the Canadian Grand Prix. 2025, this year up until this point.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not counting DNFs because DNFs will screw the whole metrics up.
Yeah.
So coming into this race this year, the average finishing position of the highest driver, I'm just saying the highest driver, was P5, and they got P1.
Okay.
So what does that tell you? So what that tells me is that 2022 and 2023 a little bit are, let's just say the gaps were much bigger and Mercedes was kind of in a spot. The gaps started closing and Mercedes was sort of falling more behind, which is why I think you see their average finishing position before Canada going backwards now in 2024 and 2025.
Yeah.
But with that said, there's something in the DNA of that car that really likes this track because it doesn't matter what kind of, finishing position they had coming into it. They're still going to podium in Canada because something about that car likes this track. So my hot take is this. You ready for it? Canada does not require you to have great aero efficiency because it's a high downforce track. It doesn't require you to have, a lot of high speed balance to medium speed balance to low speed balance. You can pretty much set the car up for low speed and be just bang on.
All right.
So you just need to choose a smaller window. And I believe that out of all the crazy aero things, so all those things are aero related, but they've had many different aero changes from 2022, right? W13, W14, W15, like the whole thing has been changing.
Yes.
How many times have they like gone backwards to go forwards? So I don't
far
think
too many that I can count.
Far too many. So I don't think this is aero related. You know what I think it's related? The chassis. I think, we don't talk about chassis enough. And when we say chassis, I mean like the monocoque. So powertrains, engineer. In a Formula One car, the transmission, the engine, everything is mounted to the chassis. The rear. The monocoque, right?
Yeah, the monocoque.
The rear, the monocoque. The suspension elements mounted to the monocoque. So everything is mounted to the monocoque. We don't talk about the monocoque enough. You can these are like carbon tubs, right? I think they're full carbon tubs, so they're super light. And when you lay up carbon, you have to lay it up in certain ways to be able to have strength in all directions, right? You can very easily, when you do carbon layups, only have strength in one direction and no strength in the other direction. So they have done something really, I think their tub is awesome. I think their chassis is super rigid. It doesn't in roll conditions, in low speeds, where you need solid mechanical grip, like really good mechanical grip. Then you have to have a solid tub. Otherwise, if you're getting flexion, you're getting all this craziness. By the way, there's people in Red Bull that think that their tub for the longest time, their chassis has, and that's part of the reasons why they're having some of the issues that they're having. So with that said, I think Merck's got like an awesome tub, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're so good here in Canada. Okay, that's my hot take.
That's fascinating. I would have never thought to think about that. And obviously they've rehomologated to do different things, but it's kind of stayed the same within this era. That's so smart.
The only thing they did recently was they moved the driver position up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But even if you pull the driver position up a little bit, I think the science and the engineering behind how you make these tubs is how you manufacture the tub.
Yeah.
How you make the carbon tub. And I seriously doubt that has changed. So I think that they're doing a bang-on good job on manufacturing process to get a solid rigid tub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if they are getting creative with their adman or something with additives or processes to even assist, they're doing something very right there. Speaking of being good here, we're going to talk about being bad. What the heck is going on with Ferrari? What in the world?
I thought they would be so good here. I really did.
Same.
But then I went back and I looked at the historical results for Ferrari in Canada, and it wasn't very good. So maybe there is something in that car that doesn't like this particular
that car
track.
does not like a lot of things.
Yeah, it does. Well, they were supposed to bring an updated rear suspension. That didn't happen. Apparently, that's now not going to happen until maybe Silverstone.
Yeah,
I don't know. You're part of the Tifosi, Molly. What's going on? Aren't you? You're a Ferrari fan.
I am, and I'm suffering. The car sucks.
Yeah.
It had so much promise at the start of the season, and it looked like it could be competing. And I don't know if it's decisions that in upgrades that are leading them astray, the lack of upgrades that they're not keeping up. I don't really know, because it's like, this is like the clown show of seasons past, right? And there was all of this talk of like, oh, they're going to axe Vasseur too, right? Which I don't think that's fair. I think he fired back quite aptly and is like, you've changed all of this stuff and you've brought in these people and you've changed me, but you've not changed anything at the top or whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of turmoil, I think, at Ferrari right now. Yeah. And I think the clock is quite honestly ticking on Ricard, or is it Ricky with Lewis right now? I honestly think the clock is ticking on that race engineer clock. I don't think they work well together. I don't think they communicate well together. We had the same old Ferrari clown show of like Charles asking to do a different strategy, and they're like, they want to do something else. They left him out. It's the same old hot mess Ferrari all over again. And the car, I don't know.
He wanted to go longer, right? Charles wanted to go longer. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm still trying to make heads or tails of how just inefficient this car is. And you have the most powerful power unit on the grid.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the slowest cars.
Yeah.
So
should be really strong in a track like Canada where you've got great like exit traction from the Ferrari, strong pull.
All things that car has well. And I don't know if they're struggling with correlation. I don't know. Like, the lack of upgrades from them has been pretty shocking, I will say. So I'm like, I don't know.
Which is not a good sign. I know there's been conversations about like a lot of focus on the 2026 car from a lot of resources, and they've actually now had to pull some people off of the 2026 car to focus on the suspension updates. That are supposed to come in Silverstone, but it's not good signs. Even Lewis himself said some very kind of cryptic message during a question response where he said, I wish I could tell you everything, all the things that are going on behind the scenes or whatever. And it's like, whoa, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, and Leclerc and Hamilton are both like, they're not going to handle their business in the media. It is going to happen behind closed doors. And so for them to say something's going on behind closed doors in kind of all of my years usually means it's not great.
Something bad's
There's a lot, something bad's going on. Yeah.
Speaking of bad things, Mercedes had a DNF to their power unit.
Had another one
in Barcelona and from Kimi, and then here Albon's power unit went kaput. So what is going on? I know you made this awesome thread. If listeners, if you haven't checked out Molly's thread, check out the thread about power units and all the kind of like the things that a manufacturer will provide to customer teams, and then what then they have to design as sort of like the ancillary equipment. Is this a sign, Molly? Now we've got it from Williams, we've got it from Mercedes. Is this a sign something's going on with the internal combustion engine? Do we know? Maybe there's a limitation or something?
Yeah, and I don't know if we know what's failed on Alex's yet. And that's where I'm kind of holding my judgment. I hadn't seen anything, and maybe I missed it, but usually we've heard by now what it was, and it was very sudden over the radio. He kind of lost power, and it was like, we've got power unit issue, pull over, and that was kind of it. And there was nothing that stuck out to me sound-wise, and I talked about this a bit on my thread, but there are a lot of sensors that can trip within the engine that can cause the ECU to go into a protect mode and just shut it down. And so it could be ECU intervention. It could be something else. Williams doesn't have this issue, but Mercedes has had some looming problems with harnesses. So it's very team to team. If this winds up being a sensor, winds up being something mechanical, I'll hold judgment until then, because it's very rare we have some of this stuff out of Mercedes engines. And so it's one of those things where it's like, are we just high mileage in some of these components because you can reuse blocks and there's different stuff that you can reuse, et cetera, et cetera? Are we just hitting high mileage at the end of a life cycle of a power unit, period, because it's their last year with this power unit, right? Or are they doing something different to cause these failures? Because Williams does have different cooling integration with their radiators. There is differences in how Williams does put the power unit into the car from Mercedes, but it's one of those things that I haven't heard anything, and it is concerning to see all of these Merc failures. But at least with the Kimi and the George of it all, we kind of know what it is, at least within reason. The Williams one is really interesting though, because this is now the 4th in 4 races for Mercedes.
Yeah, and that's I was just checking to see if there was any updates. Looks like there's no updates, but Toto Wolff has come out and said, I mean, our engines have been as good as gold since the introduction of the hybrid area, and so strong. Now is the final year. All sights on next year. And Hyvel and his group are fully on top of the reliability issues that we have. And statistically, if you look at the many years and the failures we had were very minimal. So we need to learn what happened. Yeah. And Alex even said, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Well, this is Toto. I don't know what happened to Alex, actually. I'm sure we'll understand and learn. So nothing yet. We don't know.
It's one of those, And that's that he had that engine cover blow off too, where he lost that whole side of his car in Montreal.
Yep.
I genuinely, when I saw that, was like, are all of his rods where they need to be? Is everything where it should be? What the hell?
Looking for holes and stuff as that slow motion going by.
Did he lose the entire side of his block? Like, what the heck? Because, I mean, typically when a rod goes to God out of an engine, you'll blow a hole in the engine cover like that. Mm-hmm. But to lose the whole side like that is wild.
I mean, it's almost like something like air got underneath the panel somehow. Maybe somebody missed putting a fastener on or something, and it
wasn't tightened all the way.
It's weird.
Or
you wouldn't think that. I
mean,
my brain sort of went to, well, that's an area that you have extremely high lift, on the body, because you're downwashing a lot of air right there, which generates a lot of lift. And I was like, oh, well, could you have sucked it off? I mean, if it's not strong enough. And I was like, no, it couldn't be that way, because then you would have some sort of not a habitual, but a consistent failure mode that you would be seeing. It's possible, though, that during the carbon layup or the manufacturing, you could have had some sort of discontinuity or some sort of flaw, defect. I'm not sure, by the way, when they manufacture these carbon fiber body parts and stuff, what kind of post-manufacturing test could you do to ensure? I mean, they probably do laser scanning.
Yeah, they probably X-ray or CT scan.
X-ray,
all of that localized and laser and all of that. So
I guess that's the only thing you could really do to just make sure you don't have any flaws or defects.
Yeah, because I was like, oh shit, he had that engine cover come off, but I was like, it wasn't his engine when his engine cover came off.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
There's nothing wrong with the engine, yeah.
And that's where, this is where my design brain, and this is, for our listeners, an insight into how we do this. I won't be raising a flag on Mercedes has a problem until we know the failure mode of what caused it to fail, and is it common? Is it in line with what we're already seeing, or is it something different? Because if it's an oil pressure issue like Kimi, then okay, now we have 2 incidents. That now means potentially this is a batch issue there's going to be more than one. We need to go look at everything else. If it's a loom issue, chalk that up to build variation, but still also go check all your looms, your continuity and everything. Or is it something else? And at that point, if it is something else, what is it? What's the potential impact of it? How did it happen? How could it happen? And all of that. So it's kind of, I think it's one that if it's common and known, cool, that makes it really easy for Mercedes. But if it's unknown, that could be a little scary, especially in something where they have had such low, I said IPTV earlier, it's essentially incidents per 1,000 vehicle is what you use in like road car, but it would be incident per vehicle is the metric you use for reliability. So like, and you could walk around with an IPV of 2 is very common in the industry for like, so for every 1,000 vehicles, I could have 2 with this quality issue. Like it's one of those things. It's a risk factor matrix.
Yeah.
So like their incident per vehicle is so low that it's one of those things where also they could say, you know what, it was a one-off. We know this can happen. Here's how to prevent it. We'll put everything in place and let it go at that point. Here's how to prevent it for their customer and let it ride. So I'm really curious to see what caused Alex's power unit to fail, because even for me, because we've talked this before, I'm a freak and can tell you usually by the sound of it what it was, but it lost power. He was, I think, drive off and just you heard the power cut, which to me does say potentially there was an ECU intervention. So maybe it was something with a sensor or something electrical that it kind of.
But he was managing a problem all race.
Yeah, he was.
Between him and his engineer, they were talking about some issue. Because remember, he was like, I'm nowhere, because they were managing some kind of an issue.
Yeah, and I don't know what that issue was. I don't know if it was related to the power unit, where maybe it could be something in his control electronics, where like Alonso in Monaco, where he lost it was like 16 horsepower or something because his MGUK wasn't working. So it's one of those I'll have to look into it a little bit more, but it's not super obvious. It is a little concerning that Mercedes is having some issues, but if you think about it in the last year of a power unit, you have nothing to lose, right?
Yeah. Yep. Very interesting thoughts there. So, we're kind of rounding third and heading home now, I guess, as I like to say. So Austria is looming.
The Red Bull
Ring. So we got a week off. We got the Red Bull Ring, exactly, which used to be great for like the RB16, the RB16B, like all these cars.
Yeah.
Another incident or instance where like we can say that the design of a car just suits a track really well. In the older regulation set, it was like the Red Bull Ring worked really well for the Red Bull car, but has not been that way for this car. So I don't think that Red Bull is going to be very strong there. I think that Mercedes could be strong. I think that McLaren, obviously, just based off of their performance and where they're at, has a good chance to be strong. So it could be between McLaren and Mercedes all weekend, with Max just dragging a wheelbarrow where it shouldn't be,
Max doing Max things. Do you think McLaren is ever going to let those two race again after Montreal?
Gosh, we totally skipped over that. Oh my gosh,
you just mentioned it. I'm sorry. You brought that up with them going to run well, and I'm like, how are they going to play this going forward after Montreal, right?
We've talked about it, Yeah,
it was shades of 2011.
It was gonna happen. Something was bound to happen when you let these guys race like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Lando, honestly, I think boneheaded move by Lando. I mean, first of all, there was nothing there. Oscar was kind of drifting slowly to the left when Lando had already kind of committed to going left. And then it was like he just stayed in it. And then he got into the grass, and that's all she wrote. So, I think
Blake tweeted something that was so funny.
Oh, did he? Okay.
If you don't go for a gap that doesn't exist, good job. Otherwise, shit job. And that summed it up so well for me. I was like, man, a few words, but just hit the nail on the head as always.
Yeah, that's dead on. But I mean, I think like I posed this question. My feeling is that you have to now start leaning towards Piastri a little bit, giving maybe Piastri some priority positioning, unless he's obviously qualified super low and Lando's up in a race. But like if the two are there, I think Piastri is there. He's on top of it. He's leading the championship in the drivers' championship. He's been probably the most consistent, I think, of the two. But I was pretty much told that I was crazy on X for thinking that, and it's way too early. So, which I do kind of agree. It is early. I mean, you can let them race. Early. They're so far ahead, like in the constructors, that like you could. But Max is not far away. Look
at the gap.
He got closer to Lando now, right? So I think if Red Bull has one good upgrade that comes in and solves the deg issues, now you got a problem, you know?
Yeah.
And if you lose points in 2 races because you let these guys race, everybody is going to be asking you at the end when maybe your guy's now P3 and Max is P2. I mean, let's just say for this example.
Yeah.
Then everybody's going to be asking, why did you lost so many points because you were just letting these guys battle each other?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree. We've been saying it for a while is they're going to have to make a choice at some point or it is going to bite them in the ass. And that's exactly what happened by letting them race.
right.
Look at what happened. Put both drivers at risk. Had they both DNF'd, what would have that been with the points then, right? Like how close would it be now? And so it's one of those things that it's early, but you
That's
have
the
to be
point I was
thinking about
trying to
things like
make.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, is that like they got lucky in this instance. They were
They
literally
really did.
millimeters away from Piastri getting a puncture, and they're both done.
I thought they were both done, period. I thought they were both into the grass and the wall when it happened. And it was a dumb move. It was an unnecessary risk, in my opinion, that the team should have either shut down or just said hold position. It was far too unnecessary to be doing.
Yeah.
If they want to let them race, fine. But you would think as a teammate you're going to want to race cleanly. I'll leave it at that. But at the end of the day, the team needs to be protecting their best finishing positions. And if that means laying down the law, tough shit. I'm sorry. Somebody's not going to be happy at the end of the day. And sorry. It's to preserve best possible finishing position and to make sure that they are getting their payout for constructors, because constructors is what pays the bills. We learned that from Yost. Constructors is what pays the bills. They're gonna have to prioritize to not let them race at this point because they need to preserve their, like you said, they are one DNF, one double DNF, one team having a really good race away from their lead not being as comfortable anymore.
Yep. And people's arguments about, well, it's a long season is also an argument for why you should not allow them to do this, because of the fact that it is a long season and others can start to chip away at your lead over time. It's not like we're talking about 6 races left and you guys have like and there's like 150 point lead or something like that that nobody's ever going to recover. Then it's kind of like, well, it's pretty much done. But no, it's because it's a long season as well that you've got to, I think, be very sensible about this. You can lose it.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, it is theirs to lose. And I fear and I said this early in this season, I fear that with it being theirs to lose, they're going to find a way to lose it with this papaya rules, no number one business. It was so shades of Jensen and Lewis in 2011. Same exact spot, same exact move.
Exactly.
Like,
yep.
So
it was like history repeating itself.
It was. I was like, "Hey Siri, play night changes."
Speaking of, Molly, we need to live stream a race. We need to live stream a race sometime. I was watching.
Siri's actually trying to play that. I don't want that.
No,
that's not Obbs' voice in my AirPods.
Oh, that's right. You can hear it.
Oh my god. Whoops. Oh, all right. Now back on track. Sorry, pun intended.
Yeah. That's okay.
So
like I was saying, we need to live stream a race sometime.
We do.
You and I saw some of the reactions from some of the other creators.
It was so funny.
And podcast hosts. It was so funny. But like, I was just, I don't know about you. Like when that happened, my mouth was just like wide open.
Like,
oh my gosh.
I was yelling. So I'm not super dramatic. I'm a little bit of a front seat race engineer. With my data when I watch, but when like stuff happens, I'm like a little like I'm like grabbing for something, and I was like I gasped and was like, no way.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh.
My reaction was a little bit like Ash Vandalay, if you've seen her reaction, where it was like gasp, oh my god, what, and immediately was like, who was it? John Floor.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Well, we got just a couple minutes left, so let's talk about Austria real quick. So I think I said, I feel like Mercedes and maybe McLaren could be the strongest. What about you, Molly? Who do you think could be strong in Austria?
Not Ferrari. But I think VCarb's putting in another very quiet season, so I think they're one
like the slow
to watch as well. They really like the slow corner track, so this could be a good weekend for VCarb.
Yeah.
Who else has been doing some like sneaky quiet? VCarb's really been my sleeper. I feel like, Max loves the Red Bull ring, so he's gonna drag that car to.
He'll
Kingdom
drag it
Come, no
places
business
it
where it's going
shouldn't
to be.
be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we know that's going to happen already. I think Ferrari's going to be Nowheresville. VCarb will probably be the surprise. I don't know about Kick. I don't know about Haas.
What about Aston? I mean, they rolled out their AMR, they rolled out their update, and it seems like Alonso's been able to qualify really well in it, but then when the race comes, they're like nowhere in the race pace.
So maybe he could put in a good lap in quali, because Red Bull Ring's a short track too. So
it is short track. Yeah,
maybe over a short track. I think Alpine's still Nowheresville, although Gasly seems to be dragging cars places. They have nowhere business being, again, typical Gasly things, but they were pretty much Nowheresville in Montreal, so I don't expect them to be anywhere really in Austria, as much as it pains me. Kick's they've had some shining moments here and there. Like,
I know they have. I mean, Barcelona, right? I think was a highlight. So I think
VCarb is going to be my team to watch.
Okay, nice. I like it. Good. So should I take us out, or do you want to take us out, Molly?
You want me to do my usual quick
yeah, you
rundown?
Take us out, Molly.
All
You're
right,
like, you got it down. It's like,
got it on.
Who was it? Who was it? Was it Bob Barker with Bob Barker with? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna date myself. But The Price is Right. When he's like, his sign off was like, remember to spay or neuter your pets. It's like every single time. I'm not, but like he's like bang on with his like, his exit.
Is it bad that I was like Drew Carey, because Drew Carey hosts that?
Yeah, this is you're younger than me, Molly. I know. So this is like yes. No, it just shows how old I am, Molly. Yeah, exactly.
I feel old sometimes. Someone said something to me the other day about an album that was like turning 20, and I was like, no, I cannot have that conversation right now. And I'm only 32. I was like, I can't even. Yeah. All right, let me get us out of here. All right, ready? All right, so that is it for our episode today on the Breaking Bias podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and you can find us anywhere your podcasts are located. We are on YouTube, Spotify, X, and Apple. And if you like what Obbs and I do here, go give us a follow over on Twitter at Breaking Bias Pod. And then also Obbs and I basically do this, but in written form over there as well. So feel free to interact and hit us up over there if you have any questions. We're always happy to chat and answer, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Oh my gosh.
Awesome.